Well, hi guys, it's that time. It's our Bible teaching snippet of the day. Yesterday I told you that I wanted to start talking about the sermon that I bought. I bought this, it's a little bitty booklet, it's only 34, 35 pages long, but it's a sermon that was given by Rev William Metcalfe in 1840, June 8th of 1840. That sermon is like 180 years old this month, and he's talking about the abstinence from the flesh of animals as food. It's a Bible testimony. He did this sermon. He calls it an address, but it's actually a sermon that he delivered to his church on one of their anniversaries of being here in America. Now, before I start talking about what's inside this booklet, because I've learned a lot of things I did not know, by the way, I want to talk a little bit about Reverend William Metcalfe so you kind of understand who he is. He was a meat eater until he was about the age of 21 or 23, something like that. And he was converted by a gentleman by the name of Reverend William Cowherd, C-O-W-H-E-R-D, Cowherd. From there, he and his wife both became vegetarians, okay? They were living in England, I believe. I probably need to read some of my notes. It's been a week or so since I've read these. But he came to the he was 21 years old when he converted to being a vegetarian. And he was converted by Reverend Cowherd, and they called their little group in England the Perfect Way. Okay, very interesting. And his wife, as well, became a vegetarian. Okay, now I want to throw this in because I don't want to forget to say this, because I'm going to read you some stuff about the threats that people made, that it was a health issue for him, that they were going to die, and all kinds of stuff. This gentleman and his wife both lived, she lived to be 74, and I believe he lived to be either 74 or 75. I believe he was 75 years old when he passed away. And I know that might not sound like he lived to be a ripe old age, considering that around the world, people who are vegetarians, and by that I mean plant-based only, no animal byproducts, which would be milk, cheese, eggs, stuff like that, or anything that has that mixed in with it, okay? They were what you call plant-based. Oh, that's my lunch, by the way. But anyway, so the blue zones around the world, okay, people live to be, they call them centurions because they live to be 100 or older without any sicknesses, okay? What I'm talking about are major diseases like heart disease, stroke, respiratory issues, cancer, okay? All of these things that are, and diabetes, they're not obese and everything. And what it is that since they're eating a plant-based diet, they're not taking in animal meats or animal byproducts. They live a healthier, more active, they have more energy. Most of them exercise and walk and do things, but they live well into 100 or older, okay? I want to talk to you a little bit about his lifespan, though, because in his day and time, and this is the date of his birth, the average expected age of a man to live back in 1787 was only 38 years old, okay? Now, when he died, the expected lifespan of a person to live, and this is in 1862 when he passed away. This man was 75 years old. The expected lifespan was only 45 years. So I want you to keep that in mind. Just because in our minds we think 74, 75 isn't an old ripe age, it was in that day and time, okay? In that day and time, he lived almost double the lifespan of a normal lifespan expectancy. Okay, so let me start here, and I just want to read a little bit to you about this. This is Reverend William Metcalfe and his wife. It says, the current, and I'm on a website, International Vegan It's ivu.org. I can post the link and you can see what I'm reading. But I just want to share this. I want to build an understanding of who he is, his background, and everything. And then I want to dive in tomorrow and start talking to you. There's a couple of 3 things in this book that I was just blown away with when I started reading it, okay? Because it's something that I have, out of all of my research, and guys, you guys, if you follow me very much on Facebook or YouTube, you know I am a researcher. I like to turn rocks over and find what's hidden under them. Because, see, guys, the truth doesn't float on top of the water, okay? I'm just being real with you today. If you want truth, it's not just floating out there on top of the water, guys. We've got to dig deep to find it sometimes because, you know, we are 2,000 years out from when Jesus walked the earth, okay? I mean, let's think about that. There's been a lot of people wanting to sway who Jesus was, what he believed, what he taught, what the disciples and apostles taught, what the early church taught. And what I find, and I'm not trying to be rude here, I find that Christians overall, even Christian leaders in America, have not studied our history, our true history. We'll go back to, 400 or 500 AD when the Roman Catholic Church spread all over the globe, if you want to call it that, all over the earth, all throughout all the different areas of the world, because they had the Roman Empire behind them. And we think that's our history of Christianity. No, if you go back to the times of Jesus, to old writings, and the men that lived before, they're called early church fathers, way back. They either were part of the apostles or sat under the apostles. You will find that Jesus taught not to eat animals. You will find the disciples did not eat animals. And I know this might upset some people, but it's true. There is so much evidence that James, Jesus' half-brother in Jerusalem, was a lifetime vegetarian. And if they lived in the same household, why wouldn't Jesus be? Now let's talk about this. There's writings that Mary and Joseph, his earthly parents, they were vegetarians. And I know this really bothers a lot of Christians, but you've got to pull the layers back to get to truth because we're 2,000 years out, okay? What I found is that the early church leaders, prior to the Roman Catholic Church taking over and the Roman Empire turning Christianity into something a little more acceptable by society, the early church was indeed vegetarians. The leaders were vegetarians, and it was required of Christians. If you were going to call yourself a Christian, you had to to abstain from eating meat. You could not eat the flesh of animals. Anybody that wants to spend a couple hours to know truth with the internet, a couple of hours you can know this, okay? So let me hop in and read a couple of things to you about William Metcalfe, because listen, he's the one that brought the movement of being a vegetarian into the United States, because the United States and what we believe really has more of a Roman Catholic background. And by the time the United States came around, they had already laid down the vegetarian, abstaining from the flesh of animals. That was way history. They kind of started moving toward eating animals in 400 AD, and the longer it went, by 800 AD, they had started really not requiring the church members to be vegetarians, although most of the leaders still were. They had kind of dropped that. You'll find when a religion or any group wants to grow exponentially, they will lower their standards and start accepting things that they never accepted before. And this is true with all religions and vegetarianism, okay? All religions, if they want to go big time and get lots of followers, they have to accept that people want to eat flesh of animals, and so they lay that down, okay? Even now, let me throw this in. Did you know that in the beginning, the Seventh-day Adventist movement in the United States, which, by the way, gets a bad rap, but they are just not a break-off, but a stream of the Methodist Church that was started by John Wesley. John Wesley was a vegetarian, and all of his church was vegetarians, guys, okay? And so the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they used to require, if you're going to be part of their church, you have to take a vow to abstain from animal flesh. They stopped requiring that, so they have grown some over time. So as we lower our standards, we get more members, right? And guess what? We get more money. Okay, so let me read this to you real quick. And it says here, the current and increasing publicized debate over the vegetarianism of Jesus Christ, brought to the mainstream largely by people for the ethical treatment of animals, has a history in the United States. In the 18th century, America's various Christian sects practiced ascetism. That means to try to move to a higher spiritual level and by not letting yourself get involved in fleshly things like drinking heavy alcohol and really enjoying that, and doing things that the flesh really enjoys. It's called self-denial, okay? And that would include the eating of flesh, because that's considered one of those things that people enjoy doing. So anyway, they practice the self-denial and of vegetarianism. However, it wasn't until the 19th century, as far as this historian has been able to discern, that vegetarians took their contention about Jesus and vegetarianism public. It began in 1817 when Rev William Metcalfe of England brought a small group of Bible Christians, members of a church established a decade before by Reverend William Cowherd, and they came to Pennsylvania. So Reverend Metcalfe and his wife came to the United States in 1817, and he's, as far as we can tell, the first minister in the United States that taught that Jesus himself was a vegetarian. Okay, I tell you what, and it says here, and there's some more things. It was like 42 people on the boat total. Some I think it's like 19 kids and 21 adults, something like that. Then I want to go ahead and read a couple of the things that they said to him about when he became a vegetarian. And this is his writing, okay? I'm reading it straight from Reverend Metcalfe's notes. It says, and they assured me, he writes at a later period, that I was rapidly sinking into a consumption, and tried various other methods to induce me to return to the customary dietetic habits of society, but their efforts proved ineffectual. Some predicted my death in 3 to 4 months, and others, on hearing my attempt to defend my course, hesitantly not to tell me that I was certainly suffering from mental derangement, and if I continued to live without flesh food much longer, I would unquestionably have to be shut up in some insane asylum. All was unavailing. Instead of sinking into consumption, I gained several pounds in weight during the first weeks of my experiment. Instead of 3 or 4 months bringing me to a silent grave, they brought me to a matrimonial altar. So he's talking about when he met his wife, and it says, and my wife, she fully coincided with my view on a vegetable diet, and indeed on all other important points, was also ready to defend them to the best of her ability, suited to show our acquaintances, whenever they paid us a visit, that we could live in every rational enjoyment without the usual use of flesh for food. She was an excellent cook, and we never was at a loss as to what we should eat. We commenced housekeeping January of 1810, and from that date to the present, we have never had a pound of flesh in our dwelling, have never patronized either slaughterhouse or spirit shop. So they never did buy animal meat or any alcohol. Now, I'm going to close out by saying this. When they when she got pregnant to have her first baby, this is when they really got a lot of flack from, because they wanted to tell her that she was going to die trying to carry a baby and not eating meat, and that the baby would probably die in her stomach or die so quickly after it was born, and that she would probably die during childbirth. And actually, what happened is she had a very, very healthy pregnancy, right? And she had a very easy birth, and the baby was perfectly healthy. So I'm going to call it stops here today. I'm almost out of time. But like I said, I appreciate you listening because I want to give you a backdrop of who this gentleman was. There's so much more I could tell you about him, but I did want to give you just a backdrop of who he is and what I'm going to read from tomorrow and talk to you about this, okay? I love you, and I will see you here. Bye-bye.